Hello and welcome to my easy to understand guide to Pride magazine, which is a set text for GCSE media studies and could appear in component 1, section A as either a media language question or a representation question. If we start by having a look at the masthead of the magazine, which is the title, Pride, that word tells us how we are supposed to feel as an audience. So that word is encouraging the audience to feel proud of themselves and suggesting that the magazine perhaps is also proud of themselves and of us as the readers. That might really cause a feeling of positivity in the readers, which might help them engage with the magazine. The word pride also has connotations of positivity for minority groups, whether that is people from LGBTQ backgrounds or people from ethnic minority backgrounds. So the idea is perhaps the use of the word pride might connote that the audience are often not encouraged to feel proud of their ethnic backgrounds in other media products, but that this magazine is taking their ethnicity seriously and does want them to feel proud of it. The masthead is positioned just behind Naomi Harris's head in the layout and design. This is a really common convention for lifestyle magazines. They often do cover slight parts of the masthead with the cover star's image. And this is often because the cover star is the most important part for a lot of magazines. They are the thing that is going to draw in the readers. Also, what it suggests is that the masthead and the branding of the magazine is so famous that audiences should recognise the magazine even if they can't read the whole word. So it connotes that the magazine itself is really well known if they're willing to cover up the title of their magazine. The strapline of the magazine, celebrating 24 years at the top, connotes that the magazine is successful. It makes us see them as winners. I mean, it's a bit vague. At the top of what? I don't know. Is there a chart? Are they right at the top? We don't really get that information. But it certainly does seem to connote to the audience that this is a well respected, best selling magazine and that we should see it as a very high quality product. The colour palette is mostly red and white. These are quite powerful, strong colours, so perhaps connoting that they want the audience to feel quite powerful and strong. Sometimes we associate like red, white, and black with being quite masculine colours, but I think that's because we have these associations with them being powerful, and we often associate power with masculinity. So perhaps the use of these powerful colours is about maybe challenging our ideas about gender or trying to appeal to more strong women or encouraging female audiences to feel strong. Naomi Harris is the star of the magazine front cover. She is a star of one of the Bond movies you might have studied, Spectre, quite a famous British actress, and she looks quite confident in this cover image. She's standing in quite a confident pose with her hand on her hip, looking directly at the audience. And so this connotes confidence, strength, and power to us as well. The way she's standing with her hand on her hip, it's quite a typical pose that photographers will often ask women to do, not necessarily men. We sometimes think this is because it draws your attention to a woman's waist and makes it look perhaps smaller or curvier, and so draws our attention to her body. And this might, sort of infer that her body is important. In fact, many of the cover lines on Pride magazine front cover do communicate the idea that appearances and bodies are important. A lot of the cover lines are about bodies in some way, whether it's the cover lines that talk about wigs and hair, or whether it's cover lines talking about women's bodies being objectified. It certainly seems to suggest that women's bodies are quite an important part of our world. However, unlike many other women's lifestyle magazines, this magazine is quite unconventional in the way it talks about women's bodies. So rather than having a large number of cover lines all about how to look great, how to look thinner, how to look sexier, the cover lines actually openly talk about how women's bodies are objectified, mocked, sexualized. So the magazine is calling out or drawing attention to these common ideas about women's bodies. So perhaps representing the magazine as being quite modern and taking a more political look at it. And that might help us understand that the kind of women that read this magazine don't necessarily want conventional lifestyle magazines. They do want something that is a little bit different. One cover line on the magazine mentions female genital mutilation. So it does suggest that this magazine does look at quite serious topics, quite political topics, and you can see that with the mention of feminism as well. So perhaps suggesting that unlike a lot of other women's lifestyle magazines that focus on hair, beauty, and fashion, this magazine does have quite a lot of focus on political affairs that will be relevant to their target demographic. They use the acronym FGM to talk about female genital mutilation, and that kind of suggests they think the audience are going to be educated enough to understand the acronym and are going to have a certain level of understanding about the issue itself already. There is a cover line about wigs, and you might think that this is encouraging women to try and change their appearance in order to look better, which is a more reflective of the typical conventions of lifestyle magazines. So there are some more conventional ideas about appearances and changing the way you look. However, wigs are an issue which is specifically appealing to a predominantly black female audience. Wigs are quite commonly worn by black women, whether it's a full wig or a hairpiece or a weave of some kind. And so the use of this cover line is designed to particularly appeal to that audience who might be familiar with this and might be able to relate to it because it may be something that they use a lot of. It also reflects the consumerist nature of magazines because the likelihood is if they're telling us about these wigs in the magazine, they're going to be trying to convince the readers which ones are the best ones to buy. The cover lines on the front of a magazine act as Enigma codes. They are there to draw in the audience and make them interested in the full narrative of the articles inside. So they're almost like teasers. You know, they tell us just a little bit about an article. They make it sound controversial or exciting or entertaining. And the idea is that this is like a tiny advert on the front cover that readers will see as they pass by the magazine in a shop or online, and it will encourage them to buy the magazine, to read the article, to find out the full storyline of what has been going on. The choice of Naomi Harris, a black female actress, and the mention of black women's bodies on the front cover, suggests that the target audience for the magazine are black women, but also it might reflect kind of social, cultural, political context of modern society where black women are typically underrepresented in the media, and certainly in the mainstream media, and in particular in magazines. And so the choice to include them on this magazine is quite unconventional, although it is conventional for Pride as a title, because Pride magazine always has, for the most part, a black female cover star. So this magazine is representing a typically underrepresented group of people. The ideas about feminism and the objectification of black women, the female genital mutilation may be reflective of some of the current issues that face black women both in Britain and in other countries. So there is lots of evidence of social and cultural context that might be familiar to an audience or at least interesting to an audience. Despite the masthead being about pride, and despite them featuring a black female actress, along with articles about women's bodies and black women's bodies in particular being objectified and mocked, you would think that the rest of the cover lines would be about celebrating black women's natural beauty. But the fact that there is this article about the wig revolution, it kind of suggests that black women should be hiding their natural hair. And the fact that Naomi Harris's hair is straightened when actually in reality she has much more kind of African textured hair, it kind of suggests that Western ideals of beauty are more attractive and mainstream. And this is true of many media products often show this. So they will straighten black women's hair and encourage them to look more westernized, often failing to represent more natural black beauty, such as Afro hair. However, this is also quite representative of lifestyle magazines. They will often encourage women to change in some way. They will encourage you to change your makeup or your hair or your clothes to look what they consider or tell you is better. They act as aspirational things, and they are there to sell you products at the end of the day. So I suppose the idea is with this wig revolution and Naomi Harris's straightened hair, that inside the magazine somewhere there will be some articles about how you too could achieve this look if you just buy some products. Naomi Harris herself is a very beautiful, slim, conventionally attractive woman, and so perhaps perpetuating the ideas of beauty by the choice of the cover star as well. The cover line, "How far would you go to be beautiful?" suggests that you could make changes to become more beautiful, and that beauty is perhaps something to aspire to. Although some readers might interpret this cover line differently and see that as a very negative thing, perhaps recognizing that the article might be about the dangers of going too far to be beautiful. The exclamation mark used on the FGM article suggests that it is shocking and connotes that the magazine sees this topic as shocking. Although the topic of FGM is often associated with other countries, so for example, countries within the continent of Africa, this cover line suggests that this is happening on Harley Street, which is a street in London famous for cosmetic surgery. This implies that the kind of FGM they're going to be talking about is not necessarily mutilation that has been done against the person's will or consent, but the kind of operations that some women are now having now to change the looks of their bodies in terms of their genitals. This suggests that this particular article is about operations that women may choose voluntarily to have. And therefore, this cover line also connotes that perhaps there are things that women can do to change their bodies. So, although Pride magazine looks in small parts to be trying to be a bit different, and it clearly identifies the way women are objectified and mocked and discriminated against, its cover lines at the end of the day still suggest that women could and sometimes should change the way they look in order to look better for other people. The magazine uses quite inclusive language on some of its cover lines. So, have we fallen through the cracks? The use of this we helps to engage the reader. It makes them feel like they're part of the story. It makes them feel as though they are on the same terms with the magazine editors. So, it makes them feel included. The use of the direct address, how far would you go to be beautiful, is another good way of engaging the audience, talking directly to them and making them feel part of the magazine. So if you get pride as a media language question, you need to be ready in that GCSE exam to be able to pick apart things like the colours and why they've been used, why that body language or that facial expression, what do the cover lines connote or suggest about the magazine, and be able to talk about how conventional it may be or not for a women's lifestyle magazine. If you get pride as a representation question in comparison to an unseen magazine that the exam board will provide you with, then you need to be ready and willing to compare the representations within the front covers that you have. So, for example, can you explain now how women are represented on this magazine, not just in the image itself of Naomi Harris, but also within the cover lines? Can you talk about how ethnicity or Black women in particular have been represented, whether this is stereotypical or whether this is different to other media products? And can you compare the representations in this to that in other magazines? And that is something that you can practice between now and the real exams.